How do you like your fairy tales? Soft and cutesy, like modern Disney? Maybe a little darker, more somber, like the older, pre-massively corporate Disney, a Fantasia sort of era, the original Snow White era? Or do you prefer something as authentic as when it was first told? As dark as, well, as Agent Dale Cooper would say.
Mr. Cooper, how do you take it? Black as midnight on a moonless night. Pretty black.
It's a safe assumption to say Dimfrost Studios like their tales this dark, as their current game offering, Bramble, the Mountain King, greets gamers who start it up with a content warning that is pretty fair. This is a game that is not for the weak of heart. But if you were looking for something to play, maybe in the build-up to Halloween, you could do a lot worse than this dark and twisted adventure. Fairy tales have their place in society, and often, in the past, were as much instructional and advisory for children as they were entertainment. Yet they also did give rise to nightmares in some children, and as we awake as our protagonist Ule, after his mother's tales from the bedtime stories roused a fear in him, we find our older sister Lillimore has gone missing from our small bedroom. And after a brief search, we wander out into the night forest to find her. After a quick search finds her atop a nearby hill in some old ruins, our moonlit playtime is sent into adventure and exploration as we tumble quite literally from the ruins into a world of wonder. But don't be fooled. Our siblings are more curious than afraid, and are fascinated by this new world of gnomes, fairies, and frog kings. Yet after a brief spell of cutesy shenanigans that can almost feel cloyingly sweet, the veil is lifted starkly as our sister is kidnapped, and thus begins a journey to find her that will take us through unimagined horrors and an unravelling thread that links our sister's abduction to a larger systemic issue threatening the whole land. The first thing to strike you about Bramble will most likely be its incredible visuals. Whilst going for an ethereal and otherworldly aesthetic, the world is also very realistic, with different locations all showing a very rich design and level of detail, and with particle effects and weather conditions that playing with the light and darkness really heightens the tension and respite in equal measure that sucks the player in. The choice of the characters being given almost porcelain doll-like features really heightens this choice, as it gives a familiar, more time-honoured feeling to proceedings as you wander around as Ule. The animation is fluid, and for a small studio's only second game, Bramble the Mountain King has a level of polish that honestly puts most AAA titles to shame. There can, however, on very infrequent occasions, be occurrences where a particular animation may not work. You may have to try again to, say, climb a ledge or catch a particular platform. However, I will say this only happened in a few instances, certainly was not prevalent enough to ruin the experience. Of course, the visuals alone cannot make a game, but the score here certainly backs up the mood and atmosphere with some wonderfully chosen pieces. Dan Wakefield and Martin Wave wrote and assembled this soundtrack, and it certainly evokes those old Disney Fantasia era scores, lending real power to emotional moments in the game, providing levity and tension where it is needed in order to really heighten the player's journey in equal measure as they continue through the game. Most importantly, of course, is the actual gameplay itself. Whilst under the action-adventure tag, this is very much more a puzzle platformer. You control Ule in a linear but more open three-dimensional world, as opposed to the similar games of this ilk, wherein it is a more traditional 2D plane, such as Little Nightmares or the games like Limbo, for example. The controls here are simple, but mostly intuitive. Hopefully, as I mentioned before, there are a few occasions where trigger points don't seem to be working necessarily, where a character doesn't perform the required transitional movement. So I do hope that patches will come in future that resolve this issue. Having said that, like I say, for the most part, the controls are simple, straightforward and intuitive. Buttons are where you would expect them to be, the controls aren't too cumbersome, and the character moves fluidly enough. In terms of the actual puzzles themselves, most of them are fairly straightforward. They can be solved within a fairly short period of analytical thinking. There's nothing too deep and strenuous here. There's no need to double back in terms of a Metroidvania style where you have to go back and collect an item from several rooms or levels ago. It's mostly straightforward, and there's no real need for any brute forcing or walkthroughs. In theory, shouldn't be needed here. Of course, as well as the puzzles themselves, there are also the standard platforming sections, and there are then some boss battles as well, which will require some quick reflexes to go along with those quick wits, but nothing so taxing that you'll break a controller, as opposed to the aforementioned Little Nightmares 2, which, as we all know, was rather infamous for making players rage quit in frustration. Following the story is a fairly linear process, but there is also environmental storytelling to be found for those invested in the game's world. You cannot stray too far off the beaten track and end up lost in this game, and the whole experience should take between 4 to 6 hours depending on how much you want to soak up that storytelling and the atmosphere. I have seen some discussion online where people were very confused as to the game's plot and the ending, and I do feel that a lot of that was caused by people missing these elements. Yes, the storytelling, there is some which is narrated and there is a lot that is given to you, but there is also some environmental storytelling, certainly especially in the form of books. You really need to read these in order to make the most of the game's story, and I feel it does bring the game together in a more cohesive tale rather than just a collection of loose tales strung together. This is taken from Nordic fairy tales, and standalone they may not seem like they make much sense, but if you go the extra mile and if you actually get into the more environmental aspects of the storytelling, you actually follow every little thread, then it becomes a much better story. As such, that does also offer replayability. If you miss certain things at the end of your run, you may wish to go back, certainly after seeing the ending, and I won't put any spoilers in this for the ending. However, you may wish to return to see other things, to see how certain events make sense once they have played out. I certainly will be going to replay it. I feel that this could become a Halloween month favourite, alongside other such luminaries like Little Nightmares, Ib, Dark or Little Misfortune. Bramble the Mountain King is currently available on the Nintendo Switch, the PS5, on PC, and is also available via Games Pass on Xbox and PC. I hope you enjoyed today's review. There's another video you can watch on screen right now, and you can always like and subscribe. It really helps support the channel. Until next time, I'll see you guys again. Bye for now.
We await your return, warrior.